Okay, in this last lecture burst, I'm just going to be covering the areas of prejudice and discrimination, and then bystander intervention, along with pro-social behavior. They're kind of intertwined. A little bit on looking also at aggression, which is sort of the opposite of pro-social behavior. So you're going to see that I skipped through some material. I'm not going to talk about relationships. You can read that portion on your own in the book. Just want to zone in on some key concepts here within these areas. So prejudice and discrimination I've outlined here for you. One's an attitude, one's more of the behavior, one is more overt. We talked about attitudes in the last lecture burst, but prejudice, is that attitude, and discrimination is the treating of people differently because of that prejudice. There's a great video that's embedded here, and I've also put a couple videos on Plato. I put the Brown Eye, Blue Eyed study by Jane Elliott. She did in her classroom of second graders to show how we take our cues from others at a very young age as to what we think about other people. I also put a couple of other videos on Plato dealing with prejudice and discrimination. There's some crash course videos that are awesome, really succinct and great. So please watch those. Those are really important. They're going to help explain a lot of this. When we're dealing with prejudice, a lot of people typically think of racism. That's just one type. There's all different kinds: ageism, sexism, racism. Having prejudice against people for their weight or their sexual orientation. But basically what we're doing when we're being prejudiced with other people is that we are dividing ourselves into in-groups and out-groups. The in-group is the group that you identify with. It's the us. It's the group that you feel you fit in with. And then the out-group is the group that you don't identify with. It's the them. So this is the us versus them phenomenon. We tend to do this a lot in life. The me versus them, and what's good for me and my group and us and our family versus them and those people. And we categorize people a lot based on that. So that's sort of group categorization that's occurring. And we see this all over in various places today with what's happening in society, especially in America. But, this isn't an American phenomenon, it's a world phenomenon. But it really depends on how people are seen and viewed and where you stand on those perceptions. We can oftentimes, unfortunately, use groups of people as scapegoats. So if I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling upset at things happening in the world, I don't agree with policies that are being made, something bad just happened to me and my family, a way of sort of outsourcing that anger or outsourcing those feelings is to scapegoat it. So we tend to do this when we target other people as being the source of our frustration or the source of our negative emotions. I'm feeling really bad and negative about something and I want to outsource it. And I'm not going to pick someone in my in-group. I'm not going to pick someone who I identify with or I understand. I'm going to pick somebody who I don't have things in common with. I don't understand. I'm going to see them as the out-group member, the enemy, quote unquote. And it's often groups that have less power than the group that I'm in, whoever my in-group is. It's really hard because our outgroup and who we pick as the scapegoat changes rapidly throughout history, throughout culture changes and culture shifts. The scapegoat changes. It could be a Muslim person like it was after 9/11 or any Arab person. It could be a particular gender if a certain law just got passed that favors one over the other. So that's in-group, out-group, right? We could be angry about that and we might see more discrimination occurring as a result of those kinds of events. Now, how does it happen? How do we get to be prejudiced, right? And how do we overcome it? So that brown-eyed, blue-eyed study by Jane Elliott talks a lot about how people learn prejudice. It's not innate. It's not built in. It's not something we're born with. It is learned. And so social cognitive theory talks about how we use our cognitive processes in understanding the social world. So going back on some things that we just talked about previously with attitude formation, and how that all operates, how we form opinions about people and things, comes from society. So really, this is a great theory for understanding where prejudice comes from. How do we overcome it? One really big way is realistic conflict theory. People are often compelled to be prejudiced when resources are limited, and when we have to work together to overcome a conflict, or we have to pool our resources in order to get through a tragedy, we often see people overcoming their prejudices. This is why oftentimes, even in tragic situations, it can bring people together, because that tragedy becomes a common entity that two groups of people can share. They may be two totally opposite groups of people, but now they have a shared understanding or a shared experience of something. And that can limit the differences that they see in each other. So it's going to limit more of me seeing you as different from me, and I'm going to focus more on things we have in common, and those things in common might be a struggle that we're both facing. Social identity theory talks a little bit about how we form our identity within a particular social group. We tend to categorize ourselves and where we belong and how we fit. Even as a college student, there's social categorization, like where do you fit in your the scheme of your campus? You know, are you an athlete? Are you an academic? Are you social? Are you more to yourself? Are you a math major? Are you a psych major? All of those little things are going to play into your social identity, who people see you as, and you're going to use your peers as a form of comparison to know how you're doing, where you stand, and that's going to tell you in essence how you feel about yourself, right? So social identity is that the self-concept we start to gain about ourselves, me as a member of a particular group. And social comparison is me comparing myself to those other people in my group, so that I can know how I feel about myself. That's going to either raise or lower my self-esteem depending upon where I land there. So how can people overcome prejudice? There's lots of different types. Oftentimes we're vulnerable to the stereotypes that exist for our group, so just being aware of those. And not trying to so much as actively act against those stereotypes, but just know that they exist, have an awareness of them, so that, we can unwrap it a little bit for people. There tends to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. We've talked about this, where, I have certain expectations of a person's behavior, and because I have those expectations, they're more likely to fall in line with how I think they'll act, and it's in large part due to how I treat them. I'm going to treat people a certain way based on what I think they're capable of or who they are, and then they in essence fulfill that by responding in kind and acting exactly the way that I thought that they would. So it's kind of like a cycle that occurs. This can cause a lot of anxiety in people who might be stereotyped. So a lot of times this is for the out groups. The marginalized groups in society tend to see themselves as stereotyped and can become kind of anxious of situations where they might confirm that stereotype. They might act in a way that proves it to be true. And so they might actively engage in trying not to let that happen. We can overcome a lot of this just through education and intergroup contact. The more we have diversity, which is why diversity is plugged so much today, It's because we want people to interact with others whom they're not familiar. We want people to see that they have a lot in common, not just that they have a lot of differences. And the more we can get people to interact with one another, even though they're different, we will start to see those similarities and see those commonalities. The Robbers Cave study is presented in your book. Please read that. It talks about a very popular study that proved that just getting groups to cooperate on a task together gets them to see eye to eye and stop pointing out differences. And it's been applied to many different domains where prejudice might exist within a corporation or a group or a classroom, etc., and how that can be helpful. Okay, so the next slides go over interpersonal attraction and love. I'm going to let you look at those on your own. The last thing I just wanted to follow up on is aggression and prosocial behavior. There's a lot that's said here, but it really is very basic. Like, where does aggression come from? Some of it stems from frustration. Some of it stems from our environment. People have different theories as to, what's what. No theory is right or wrong. They're just different ways of explaining where aggression comes from. Part biology, our genes, our genetics, our DNA, our hormones can contribute, but also we learn a lot of aggression from watching others and the society that we live in, what is favored, what is fostered. I would argue that today aggression is almost seen as a positive thing. Like, if you're not aggressive, you're considered weak. That's totally a societal thing. We have the power to change that as a society. Today it's like if someone hurts you, it's like, and you don't hurt them back, oh, then you're weak. You let people walk all over you. If someone starts yelling at you in their car and you don't yell back, what's wrong with you? I would say that that's the wrong way of looking at things, but that's kind of where our society is at. We're very on edge. We're very highly aggressive. We respond very aggressively, and we've upped the ante. Each generation, it's gotten progressively worse with a lot of aggression displayed. So you want to look at some biological impacts on aggression, chemical components, things like that. And then the different social views of aggression, social learning theory, the roles that we play and stuff can contribute there. Zimbardo's prison study is a classic here. He looks at how a situation kind of made people be aggressive when they wouldn't maybe have otherwise. So take a look at that. This is also in your book, and it's also one of the Hawk readings. Again, I didn't assign this Hawk reading, but it is in there if you want to take a peek and get some extra information about that. Also, we've got prosocial behavior, looking at the opposite of aggression, which is socially desirable behavior, benefiting others when we act in a way that's altruistic and benefiting others. It's done with no expectation of reward and might actually come as a risk to the person. That's prosocial behavior. You're going to see a lot of videos I posted that have to do with bystander effect, what to do when you see something happening and you should step in, but you don't. When there's a lot of people around, this is where group behavior really comes into play. We start seeing the presence of the group influences the people in it. So if everyone else in the group isn't paying attention to something, you're less likely to pay attention to, even if you should be, because the group isn't paying attention. So check out the videos. I posted a video about Kitty Genovese. It was based in studies done by Darley and Lotney here. And it's on bystander intervention. It's a short little video, like 3 minutes long, and it explains how bystander intervention operates, how we lose our own responsibility for decision making when we're part of a group, and just the steps to how to help, deciding how to help. There's a video here that talks about it some more, which I think will be helpful for you guys. So if Feel free to look at the rest of the slides. There's just a few, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.